He fought the monster to save the alien girl, but what she did next shocked him beyond anything he ever expected. On a dark, forgotten planet where danger lived in every shadow, a lone human named John found himself standing against fear itself. This was not just a story about survival, but a story about courage, sacrifice, and a bond between two beings from different worlds. The crash had come suddenly from the black sky, the fire of the broken ship lighting up the endless alien forest. John had no choice but to leave the smoking wreck behind and step into the unknown, his body aching from the impact but his mind sharp with training. The air was heavy with mist, glowing insects drifted through the trees, and strange sounds echoed from far away, sounds that told him this place was not safe. His mission had failed, his team was gone, and he was alone on a planet where no human should have been. Yet fate was not finished with him. He walked slowly, his boots sinking into the damp soil, the light of two moons falling across twisted branches and giant leaves. He had no clear path and no way to call for help, but he had his will, and that was something no crash could take from him. For hours he pushed forward until the silence of the night was broken by a cry, sharp and filled with fear, not human, but close enough that it pulled at his heart. John froze, his instincts alive, and then without hesitation he ran toward the sound. He found a clearing lit by the strange glow of the plants, and there she was, a young alien girl, her skin pale like silver under the moonlight, her eyes wide with terror. She was trapped against a fallen tree while a towering beast circled her. The monster was unlike anything John had ever seen, a nightmare born of the wild. It stood twice his height, with black scales that caught the light, a mouth full of jagged teeth, and eyes that burned with a sick yellow glow. Each movement was slow but powerful, the ground shaking under its weight. John could see the alien girl trying to crawl away, her leg twisted and bleeding, but she had nowhere left to go. The beast was ready to strike, and if he did nothing, she would die in moments. He had no reason to care, no reason to risk his life for someone he did not know. But that cry was still in his ears, and something in her eyes reminded him of why he fought at all. Without another thought, John shouted, loud and strong, grabbing the attention of the beast. It turned on him, and he could feel the hunger in its gaze, but he did not step back. He had only a broken piece of metal from his crashed ship, sharp enough to cut, but nothing against the size of the monster. Still, he raised it like a blade and moved forward, his heart racing but his resolve unbroken. The creature roared, the sound shaking the forest, and then it attacked. The fight was brutal. The beast swung with claws that could tear stone, and John barely rolled away in time, feeling the wind of its strike. He slashed with his metal shard, cutting across its arm, and though the wound was small, it made the monster howl. The alien girl watched in disbelief, her breath caught, her eyes following every move as if she could not understand why he was standing there at all. John fought with everything he had, his body burning, his muscles screaming, but he kept pushing because he could not allow the creature to reach her. Again and again the monster came, and again John forced himself to rise. He used the trees for cover, the ground for movement, and his mind for strategy, turning weakness into strength. At last he found his moment. As the beast lunged, jaws open wide, he thrust the shard deep into its throat with all his strength. The creature staggered, roaring in rage, dark blood pouring from its mouth, and then it turned and fled into the shadows, leaving the clearing silent once more. John fell to his knees, gasping for breath, his arms trembling from the effort. The broken shard was covered in black blood, his own body cut and bruised, but he was alive. Slowly he turned to the girl. She had not moved, her silver skin glowing faintly in the night, her face full of shock and confusion. He walked closer, his steps heavy, and held out his hand to her. She hesitated, her large eyes blinking with uncertainty, then she reached out and took it. Her hand was soft and trembling, yet there was strength in the way she held on. John helped her stand, careful of her injured leg. She was lighter than he expected, fragile in body, yet strong in presence. For a moment they simply looked at each other, human and alien. Two lives that should never have crossed, yet now forever connected by the danger they had faced. Finally she spoke, her voice soft and full of wonder. "Why would you risk your life for me?" John did not answer right away. He could still feel the heat of the battle, the weight of his choice, but when he looked into her eyes he knew the truth. Because no one should be left alone. Because even on a world of monsters, life was worth protecting. He did not need to say it in words. She saw it in his gaze, and that was enough. The night deepened around them, the forest alive with whispers. And though the beast was gone, John knew the danger was not finished. Something about the way it had fled, something about the way the air seemed heavier now, told him this was only the beginning. But as he stood beside the alien girl, her hand still holding his, he felt a spark of strength greater than fear. He had fought the monster and lived, and now, for reasons even he could not yet understand, he was ready to fight again. The night after the battle with the monster felt endless, the forest alive with hidden whispers, and the soft hum of strange creatures. John carried the alien girl away from the clearing, his arms steady though his body ached with pain. Her leg was wounded badly, the skin bruised and bleeding, and every step he took was heavy with exhaustion. Still he moved forward, because leaving her behind was something he could never do. He found a cave hidden under the roots of a massive tree, its walls glowing faintly with strange blue moss, and there he laid her down gently. For the first time since the fight, he allowed himself to breathe. The girl watched him carefully, her silver eyes reflecting the dim light. Her body trembled, but not just from pain. It was something deeper, something like confusion and disbelief. No one had ever done what this human had done. No one had stood against the shadow beast for the sake of another, not in her world, not in her life. She could not understand it, yet she could not look away from him. John tore pieces from his jacket and wrapped her wound as best he could, his rough hands steady, his face calm even though his skin was scratched and blood stained his arm. When he was done, he sat back and leaned against the wall of the cave, his eyes heavy but alert. For a long time, silence filled the cave. Only the sound of dripping water and the faint breathing of the girl echoed in the stillness. At last she spoke in a quiet voice that carried both fear and curiosity. She asked him why he did not leave, why he risked so much when he had nothing to gain. John looked at her for a moment, his expression soft yet firm, and said simply that no one deserved to be hunted alone. The words were plain, but they struck her heart like fire. She had grown up in a world where survival meant turning away, where protecting oneself was more important than saving another. And here was this stranger, this human, who lived by a rule so alien it seemed impossible. As the night stretched on, she told him her name was Mira. She spoke of her people, a peaceful race who lived in fear of the monsters that roamed the forests and mountains. They built villages hidden under stone and avoided the dark. Yet still the beasts came, and each time they came, more of her people were taken. John listened in silence, his mind drawing pictures of what she described, a world trapped in terror. When she spoke of the monster he had fought, her voice lowered in dread. She told him that it was not the true danger, only a hunter that served something far greater, a beast so powerful that even the strongest of her kind refused to face it. John's jaw tightened as he listened, but he did not look away. He had seen war, he had faced enemies that seemed unstoppable, yet he had always believed that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Mira saw that belief in his eyes, and for the first time she wondered if weakness and strength were not what she had been taught to believe. Over the next days, John and Mira began to survive together. He showed her how to make fire with the wreckage he had carried from the crash, and she showed him how to use the glowing moss of the cave to heal cuts and burns. He taught her simple tricks from Earth, how to sharpen a branch into a spear, how to set traps for small creatures that moved in the night, how to listen to the rhythm of the forest to sense danger before it came. In return, she taught him how to read the stars of her world, how to drink from hidden roots without sickness, and how to understand the language of the animals that sang before storms. With every lesson shared, a bond grew between them. Mira began to smile when John made mistakes with her language, and John began to laugh when she tried to copy his Earth habits. Yet even in those small moments of light, there was always a shadow near, a weight that never left. At night, the roars of the greater beast echoed in the distance, and each time they grew louder. Mira's heart filled with dread, but John's eyes only grew sharper, his determination stronger. One evening, while the stars burned bright above, Mira confessed her fear. She told him that the greater beast would find them, that no trap, no weapon, no human strength could stand against it. She begged him to flee, to escape before it was too late, because she could not bear to see him die because of her. Her voice cracked with guilt, her hands shaking as she spoke. But John reached out and placed his hand over hers, firm and steady. He told her that humans did not run from those they chose to protect, that courage meant standing even when defeat seemed certain. His words were simple, but in that moment, Mira felt her world shift. For the first time in her life, she looked at another being and saw not weakness, not fragility, but a kind of strength she had never known. His body was scarred and tired, but his spirit burned like fire, and that fire lit something inside her own heart. She began to believe not only in him but in herself. As the night grew darker, John sharpened his weapon by the firelight, his eyes never leaving the shadows of the cave. Mira watched him, her thoughts full of questions she could not voice. She wondered what made humans like him fight for others, what made them stand when all logic said to run. She wondered if perhaps this was why his kind had survived so much. Across the stars, the suspense grew heavier as another roar shook the forest, closer this time, closer than it had ever been. Mira froze, fear flooding her chest, but John only stood taller, his hand tightening on the weapon he had made. He told her quietly that the time to run was over, that if the beast was coming, then they would face it together. His voice carried no fear, only resolve, and that resolve spread through her like a tide. The cave trembled as something massive moved in the distance, trees cracking under its steps, the earth shaking with its weight. Mira's breath caught in her throat, and her silver eyes glowed faintly with fear. She whispered that the hunter John had fought before was only a servant, but now the master was awake. John looked into the night, his body ready, his spirit unbroken. The bond between them was no longer fragile but strong, forged in fire and danger. She no longer saw him as weak, no longer believed humans fragile. She saw him as something more, something that defied her world's rules. The suspense hung thick as the sound of the beast grew nearer, and in that moment, both human and alien knew their fates were bound together. The forest no longer felt alive with mystery, it felt heavy with dread. Every sound, every whisper of wind through the branches carried a warning. John and Mira could both feel it, the way the air grew colder, the way the ground seemed to vibrate with each distant step of something too large to remain hidden. Greater beast was awake, and it was searching. John stood at the mouth of the cave, staring into the darkness where the faint glow of alien plants shimmered between the trees. Mira sat behind him, her leg wrapped but still weak, her eyes locked on his strong frame. She wanted to tell him to leave, to run as far as he could, but her voice refused to form the words. Deep down she already knew what he would say if she tried. Humans did not run. Not this one. John turned back to her, his face lit by the pale glow of the moss. He could see the fear in her silver eyes, but he could also see the spark of something more. She was stronger now, braver now, no longer just a girl waiting for fate. He walked over to her and knelt down, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. He told her that the time for hiding was over. The greater beast would never stop until it found them, and if it found them unprepared, it would destroy not only the two of them, but her whole people who lived hidden nearby. Mira's chest tightened at his words because she knew they were true. The beast was not just a hunter, it was a predator that ruled over fear, and fear had ruled her kind for generations. She looked at him, her voice trembling as she asked what he planned to do. John's answer was simple: fight, but not alone. He told her that together they could stand against it, that her knowledge of this world and his stubborn will to survive made them stronger than they believed. Mira shook her head at first, thinking of the stories of those who had tried before and never returned. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no doubt. She had never seen such certainty in anyone before, not even the leaders of her people. For the first time she felt the weight of choice, the chance to believe in something new. The days that followed were filled with preparation. John searched the wreck of his ship, bringing back metal, wires, broken tools, and pieces of armor that could still be used. Mira guided him to places in the forest where he could find the strongest wood, the sharpest stones, and plants with burning sap that could be turned into fire. Together they built traps, sharpened spears, and set hidden snares among the trees. John worked with determination, every motion steady, every plan clear in his mind. But Mira could see the toll it took on him. His cuts still bled, his body still hurt, yet he refused to slow down. She tried to help as much as she could, though her leg remained weak, but John never allowed her to feel useless. Each time she faltered, he reminded her that her knowledge saved him more than his strength, saved her. At night, they sat by the small fire, their faces close in the warmth, and Mira spoke of her people's legends. She told him that the greater beast was said to be born from the darkness of the planet itself, a shadow made flesh, a creature that carried the fear of the world inside its body. John listened carefully, and when she finished he told her something she had never considered before. Monsters, no matter how terrible, could bleed. And if they could bleed, they could be killed. Mira's heart pounded at his words because they were so different from the whispers of her people, who only spoke of hiding and waiting. His belief was like fire, burning away the chains of fear she had lived with all her life. The suspense grew each night as the sounds of the beast drew closer. They could hear trees breaking, roars shaking the sky, and the ground itself groaning under its weight. Mira often woke in the night, her body trembling, and she would see John still awake, sitting near the fire with his weapon in his hand, his eyes watching the shadows. Sometimes she thought he was carved from stone, unshakable, but then she would catch the faint lines of pain across his face, the tired weight in his eyes, and her chest would ache with something she did not fully understand. He was fighting not just for himself, but for her, and that knowledge left her both frightened and grateful in a way she had never felt. One evening, as the moons hung low and the forest seemed too quiet, John asked Mira why her people had never stood against the beasts. She looked down, shame filling her voice as she explained that fear had become their law. They told stories of strength, but none ever acted on them. She admitted that when she first saw him fight, she thought him reckless, foolish, even doomed. But now, after days of watching him work, after seeing him rise each time he should have fallen, she confessed that her view had changed. He was not reckless. He was brave in a way that made her believe there might be a different future. John said nothing in reply, only gave her a small nod, but inside he felt the weight of her words. He had not come here to inspire, yet somehow he had. The final warning came at dawn. The sky turned red, The birds vanished, and the forest grew silent in a way that spoke louder than any roar. Mira stood at the mouth of the cave with John, her body tense, her silver eyes wide as she whispered that the beast was near. John gripped the weapon he had forged from metal and wood, his muscles tight, his breath slow. The ground shook, dust falling from the cave walls, and then a sound like thunder rolled through the trees. The greater beast was coming, and it was closer than ever before. Myra's hands trembled as she reached for his arm, her voice breaking as she begged him one last time to leave, to save himself before it was too late. John looked at her, his gaze steady, and told her softly that he had already made his choice the night he heard her cry. He would not leave her, and he would not run. Mira's eyes burned with tears, but she saw the truth in his words. He was ready to face death if it meant protecting her, and in that moment, something inside her broke free from fear. The forest split with the sound of massive steps, the trees groaning as a shape darker than night itself moved through the mist. Yellow eyes like burning suns glared from the shadows, and the roars of the greater beast shook the very ground they stood on. Mira clung to John's arm, her breath fast, her heart racing, but John stood tall, unbroken, his weapon ready. The hunt had begun, and the monster was no longer searching. It had found them. The forest trembled with every step of the greater beast, its massive form moving through the mist like a shadow that devoured the light. John stood at the entrance of the cave, spear in hand, eyes fixed on the creature that towered above the trees. Mira's hand clung tightly to his arm, her pulse racing, but now there was no time to hide. The creature had found them, and every instinct John had told him that this fight would decide not only their lives, but the future of her people. He felt the weight of responsibility, yet the fear in his chest was replaced by determination. Mira watched him, her silver eyes wide, her mind racing, and for the first time she realized that courage could exist in forms she had never imagined. The beast roared, the sound ripping through the forest, shaking branches and sending birds scattering into the sky. Its glowing yellow eyes locked on John and Mira, and it moved with a terrifying speed that seemed impossible for its massive frame. John braced himself, planting his feet, feeling the earth shake beneath him. Mira whispered a warning, telling him that the beast's hide was nearly impossible to pierce, and that every strike needed to count. John nodded, his mind sharp, his body ready. This was not a fight for survival alone. It was a fight for hope. The first clash came suddenly. The beast lunged from the shadows, its claws tearing through the air, and John barely dodged in time. He rolled to the side, feeling the wind of its strike brush past his cheek, and thrust his spear toward its glowing arm. Sparks flew as the metal struck its scales, but the creature only hissed and swung again. Mira screamed, and instinctively she raised her hands. Light shimmered from her fingertips, alien energy she had never dared to use before, and a shield of glowing blue formed between them and the monster. The creature recoiled slightly, its roar turning into a frustrated growl. John's eyes met Mira's, and in that moment, both of them understood that this was a fight they had to face together, each drawing strength from the other. They circled each other, the forest around them trembling from the impact of each movement. John attacked with careful precision, striking at the beast's joints and weak spots, while Mira used her energy to create distractions and temporary barriers. Every moment was dangerous, every strike a gamble, but they fought with a rhythm that grew with every second. Mira's fear remained, yet it was balanced by something stronger: trust. She trusted John with her life, and he trusted her knowledge of the world that was alien to him. That trust became a weapon more powerful than any spear or shield. The beast struck again, faster and more aggressively this time. John took the brunt of its attack, his body thrown back against a tree, the pain radiating through his arms and chest. Mira gasped, her heart stopping as she saw him fall, But John struggled to rise, his eyes blazing with defiance. Blood-stained. His clothing, cuts ran across his arms, and fatigue weighed heavy on his muscles, yet he refused to surrender. Mira felt a surge of fear for him, but that fear turned into anger at the beast that dared to harm him. She raised her hands again, this time letting a wave of energy shoot forward, slamming into the creature's chest and knocking it back slightly. The monster roared in rage, its tail smashing trees, and John leapt forward with renewed strength. The fight continued, brutal and unrelenting. John dodged, struck, and pushed himself beyond his limits, while Mira used every ounce of her alien power. Each time the beast advanced, it was met with their combined courage. She shouted warnings, he shouted instructions, and together, they became a force neither had thought possible. Mira's heart pounded with fear and excitement, and John's mind sharpened with focus. Every movement carried the weight of survival. Every decision carried the risk of death. Hours seemed to pass in minutes, the sky above the forest turning pale with the rising sun. John's strength began to wane, his body screaming in pain, and he stumbled for the first time during the fight. Mira saw him falter and felt a wave of panic, but something inside her shifted. She realized that she could not allow him to fall. Humans were fragile, yes, but John was more than fragile. He was courage in motion, a force that refused to break. With that thought, she poured more of her life energy into the battle, focusing it through her hands, directing it toward the beast's weak points with precision she had never thought possible. The creature shrieked as her power struck it, staggering backward. John took the moment, running forward and plunging his spear deep into its chest. The beast thrashed violently, its roar shaking the forest, and then slowly began to collapse. John stumbled beside it, barely able to stand, his body trembling from exhaustion and pain. Mira rushed to him, tears in her eyes, her chest heaving as she reached out to touch his shoulder. She whispered that he had done it, that they had done it together, and he looked at her with a faint smile, blood and sweat streaking his face. But the danger was not yet over. The beast's tail lashed suddenly, striking John and sending him flying across the clearing. Mira screamed, panic filling her as she saw him hit the ground hard, his body motionless for a moment. Her hands glowed brightly, and she did something she had never dared before. She placed her palms on John's chest and shared a part of her life force with him, a forbidden gift of her people that could save a life but could never be given lightly. John gasped, his eyes flickering open, strength returning to his limbs as Mira poured energy into him. He stared at her in disbelief, realizing that she had risked part of herself to save him, and something inside him shifted. It was no longer just survival, it was gratitude, respect, and a bond that would never be broken. With renewed strength, John rose to his feet, Mira at his side, and together they struck again. The beast let out a final roar, its energy spent, its body collapsing to the ground. Silence fell over the forest, heavy and almost sacred. The air was still, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and the shallow breathing of the two who had faced death together. Mira sank to her knees, exhausted but relieved, and John stood beside her, supporting her, their hands touching as they both recovered from the intensity of the battle. Mira looked at him with a mixture of awe and something she had never felt before. "You are not weak," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are proof that courage can change everything." John nodded, too tired to speak, but the truth of her words resonated deep in his heart. For the first time, he realized that it was not just about fighting monsters. It was about inspiring belief, about showing that strength could be more than physical. It could be in spirit, in will, in the decision to act when all seemed lost. As the sun rose higher, casting light over the defeated beast, Mira and John looked toward the distant forest, knowing the danger was over for now, but also that their journey was far from finished. They had survived together, and in doing so had forged a bond that would not be broken. Every fear, every doubt, every shadow of the past was left behind in that clearing, replaced by the knowledge that courage, together, could overcome even the darkest of monsters. The forest grew quiet after the battle, the air thick with the smell of dust blood, and the strange glowing plants that still shimmered faintly under the rising sun. John and Mira stood together in the clearing, their breathing heavy, their bodies bruised and scarred, but their spirits unbroken. The greater beast lay defeated, a shadow of terror that had haunted the planet now nothing more than a pile of broken scales and smoke. Yet for John, relief did not come easily. His body ached from the fight, his energy drained, and he could feel the strain of his injuries. He looked at Mira, expecting her to feel the same exhaustion, but she seemed lighter somehow, stronger, as if the battle had awakened something inside her that had always been hidden. Mira knelt beside him, her silver eyes wide and full of concern. She had never seen a human so determined, so unyielding. She realized now that John was not just brave. He was something extraordinary, proof that even a fragile body could hold an unbreakable will. Yet as she watched him stumble, pain written across his face, she knew that even courage had limits, and she could not bear the thought of losing him. The silence stretched between them, heavy and tense, until she whispered something that shook him to his core. "I can save you," she said, her voice trembling. John looked at her, confusion clouding his expression, and she explained that her people had a forbidden ritual, a way to share life force between two beings. It was dangerous, unheard of, and could change both of them forever, but it could heal him and keep him alive. John hesitated. He had seen strange powers before, had fought in worlds where anything was possible, but this was different. This was Mira offering part of herself, risking herself to save him. His mind raced with doubts, fear, and gratitude all at once. He wanted to refuse, to tell her that he would survive, that he had lived this long by his own strength, but he saw the determination in her eyes, the way her hands glowed faintly, and he knew that the choice was already made. Her courage had become his lifeline, just as his courage had become hers. He nodded slowly, giving her permission without a word, and Mira placed her hands on his chest. A warm light flowed from her palms, spreading through his body in waves of energy. John gasped, feeling life returning to his limbs, his wounds closing, his strength renewed in ways he could not describe. It was not just healing. It was connection, a bond forged in battle and sacrifice, a joining of two lives across the divide of species and worlds. John's eyes met Mira's, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. Gratitude, respect, trust, and something deeper passed between them, stronger than any language could convey. He realized in that moment that courage was not a solitary force. It was shared, multiplied, and magnified by those who choose to fight. Together, when the light faded, John stood fully upright, his body strong again, and Mira smiled softly, exhausted but fulfilled. The forbidden ritual had cost her something precious, yet she had done it willingly. John reached for her hand, holding it gently, and told her that she had saved him in more ways than one. Mira shook her head, her silver eyes glistening with emotion, and whispered that he had inspired her, that he had taught her that humans were not weak, that courage could transcend fear and even death. The words sank deep into John's heart, and he realized that their journey had changed both of them forever. Together, they looked toward the forest, toward the hidden village of her people. Mira's people had never seen a human fight alongside one of their own, never witnessed the bond of trust and courage that now connected her to John. As they approached the village, the alien villagers emerged, cautious and curious, their eyes wide at the sight of the human who had faced the greatest predator of their world. Mira stepped forward, holding John's hand, and her voice rang out clear and strong as she spoke to her people. "This is John. He is not weak. He has faced the monster and lived. He is proof that courage can change everything." The villagers stared in silence, some in disbelief, others in awe. The legends of their world had never prepared them for this. A human standing among them, not as an outsider, but as a hero, as a symbol of strength that transcended fear. Mira's words carried weight, and in that moment, the villagers saw not just a fighter, but the bond between two beings from different worlds. A bond that spoke of trust, hope, and a future they had never imagined. John lowered his gaze respectfully, humbled by their acceptance, but he felt something rise within him, a sense of belonging he had never known. The days that followed were filled with recovery and rebuilding. Mira guided John through the ways of her people, showing him hidden paths, healing rituals, and the traditions of her kind. John shared his knowledge too, teaching them simple strategies to protect themselves, how to set traps, and how to prepare for threats that might come again. Slowly, the fear that had ruled the village began to fade, replaced by confidence and hope. Mira's people began to see humans in a new light, not fragile or weak, but resilient, brave, and capable of inspiring courage even in the darkest moments. One evening, as the moons rose high above the forest, Mira and John stood on a cliff, overlooking the village. The wind carried the scent of alien flowers, and the forest glowed faintly beneath the twin moons. Mira looked at John, her silver eyes full of emotion, and whispered that she would never forget what he had done, what he had taught her, and how he had changed her world. John smiled softly, his heart full, and told her that he would never forget her either, that she had shown him a courage unlike any he had ever known. In that moment, it was clear that their story had reached its climax, not with the defeat of the monster alone, but with the transformation of two souls bound together by trust, courage, and the willingness to fight for each other. The forest was quiet now, but the story of that day, the story of the human who fought the monster and the alien girl who chose to save him, would live on in the hearts of her people forever. They had witnessed the impossible, the union of strength and courage across worlds, and they had learned that fear could be overcome when one chose to act, when one chose to trust, and when one chose to believe in more than just survival. John and Mira stood together, looking toward the horizon, knowing that their bond was unbreakable, their courage shared, and their journey only beginning. In the end, it was not just about fighting monsters, but about showing that bravery could inspire, that selflessness could transform, and that the human spirit, though fragile in appearance, could shine brighter than any shadow, stronger than any fear, and more enduring than any legend. Mira squeezed John's hand gently, and he understood that their story was not over, but already complete in its meaning. They had survived, they had changed a world, and they had discovered that the greatest monsters could be defeated not by strength alone, but by courage, trust, and the bonds formed between two beings willing to fight for each other. The end.